Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, whatever time of day it is you're watching this, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We're talking about Yes, and we've made it to their fourth album, which is called Fragile. You may have heard of it. Yeah, it is a very famous album, and rightly so, because it is excellent. It is a defining moment in, that early era of, prog rock. And massively influential album, I think. There's some very famous songs on it, and again, I've said it before. There's so many bands that just would not exist had Yes not done what they did. Of course, you could say that about a lot of bands. Obviously King Crimson was very influential, I think. Jethro Tull has been very influential. I mean, all these bands that I'm talking about have had influence on some level or not, but I've always felt that, there's something very defining about Yes music. It defines that prog thing. A lot of people always point to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and maybe, but, Yes has the electric guitar of Steve Howe. Yes has the keyboards of Rick Wakeman and Tony Kaye on the previous album, and the drumming of Bill Bruford. There's something about Yes that just screams that screams this is prog rock. This may not be totally original. I mean, this came after some of the Crimson albums that I think they were influenced by. But like I said, it's such a great collection of adventurous songs. Famously, it's the first time we get a Roger Dean album cover. It's not the best album cover he ever did, but it is fantastic. We get a journey into another world. We open this lovely gatefold. It's not connected, but we get the spaceship, which is quite cool, flying over an apocalyptified Earth. Very grim. And then we get a nice little, well put together inner sleeve right there. Quite lovely. Yeah, it's quite good. Also very notable on this album, this is the first time we get to hear Rick Wakeman play. And obviously he's a phenomenal keyboardist, very famous, very talented. And he delivers a great performance on here. He was under a funky contract. He'd been playing with David Bowie before, actually. He was on Hunky Dory previous to this. Not a lot of people know that, I don't think. But he was under some kind of weird contract, and he wasn't actually allowed to receive any writing credits on this album, which is weird because he did write a lot of it. And the other thing that I was going to bring up is this is kind of a unique album in Yes, in that we get a collection of band songs, and we also get solo compositions as well. And obviously with Rick Wakeman being under this weird contract where he couldn't write anything, he does a rendition of some Brahms music, which is fitting. It fits what Yes were doing. But yeah, the fact that on this album they have those individual band songs, I think really makes it stand out. It makes me question: is this an absolutely definitive Yes album? I mean, I say it's a definitive prog album, and I stand by that. But as far as Yes goes, it's something really unique because they never really did that again, not to my knowledge anyway. There was never any other case where there's some band songs and then each member gets to put his own little piece on the album. And obviously other bands had tried stuff like that to varying degrees of success. I actually think all the individual band compositions on this are totally solid. They're really, really good. It holds the album together really well, and it's fantastic. The other members, obviously Rick Wakeman, we still have Bill Bruford on the drums, who named the album. Very fitting title. It's what the band sounds like. It sounds fragile. It's crisp. It's fragile. So Bruford's on the drums, John Anderson, of course, on vocals, Steve Howe still delivering some phenomenal guitar playing, and Chris Squire, who was the only bass player in Yes for the longest time. And yeah, like I said, it is an absolutely essential collection of songs. I couldn't think of one thing I get rid of. Maybe Cons and Brahms, but again, it's part of the solo thing, the solo composition, so I should say. Yeah, let's chat about the songs. It opens with Roundabout, one of Yes's most famous songs. And again, there's something like I keep talking about defining moments in prog. I think Roundabout is certainly one of those moments. This is fantastic. I mean, that famous intro. I love, you know, we hear the keyboard drone come in, and then Steve Howe has that very delicate acoustic guitar intro, and it winds its way into this just deadly funk groove. You know, one of those great Chris Squire moments. Steve Howe doing the harmonics on the guitar. It's all really good. John Anderson spitting out lyrics that have utterly no meaning whatsoever. This is the problem I have with John Anderson, is that his lyrics are just way too obtuse sometimes. I'll be the roundabout, the words will make you out and out, I'll make you stay your way. Yeah, it is. And there's a part with mountains coming out of the lake, and it's just bizarre. But it doesn't bother me because the composition itself is just so great, and it's so adventurous. Like there's so many little moments that are wonderful. You know, the keyboard bit, and the way Bruford accents those little shots are phenomenal. Yeah, and it's accessible too. I mean, yeah, there's all these changes, and you know, obviously when it goes to the quiet acoustic bit and then the funky bit, you know, there's some dramatic changes in there. But on the whole, I think you can throw Roundabout onto anybody and then get the basics of it, which is great. I mean, it's great to be able to have progressive music that is accessible to people, that people can listen to and identify with, and, you know, tap their toes to a little bit. It's fantastic. I particularly love that middle section. That middle section riff is so great. Right after, again, the other keyboard part. That is so great. The keyboards that sit on top of that are wonderful. Hell of a lot of percussion overdubs on that section, but it sounds great. You know, there's one moment in that section where there's a snare roll by Bruford that's just so crisp and so clean, and you know, like I said, Bruford had his style was so cool. I mean, I think he became a much better drummer after Yes. You know, after he went through King Crimson and did his own stuff, and you know, embarked on his journey. But his playing style on this album and the other Yes albums he played on is just so wonderful. And it like I said, it defines the sound of the band. It defines that fragility. Yes, it's great. So Roundabout winds its way up to its conclusion after its catchy choruses and all that, and we get Cons and Brahms, which is Rick Wakeman's contribution. Although it is just him doing a rendition of Brahms, obviously. And, you know, very classical sounding. Yeah, I would have preferred to hear something that he had put together, but again, it fit that whole symphonic rock thing that they were doing. It almost reminds me of some of the Gentle Giant stuff that was going on. You know, Cons and Brahms reminds me of Acquiring the Taste, the title track from Gentle Giant's album. It's not, obviously, it's Brahms. But it's fun. Then we get track 3, which is John Anderson's solo bit, We Have Heaven. You know, again, like I said, I generally have some issues with Anderson's lyrics and whatnot. I think he's a great singer. I love his singing. You know, I think he's a very important character and of that era. And yeah, like his solo composition is great. We get this weird tell the moon dog, tell the matcha, tell the moon dog, tell the matcha, and that kind of sets up the rhythm of it. And there was some other weird bits, and this kind of creepy melody where he says we have heaven. It's really cool, actually. You know, it's not there's nothing profound or anything, but it fits the album, and you know, it's an interesting kind of experimental little composition. It's cool. This takes us to track 4 of side 1. This closes up the first side. We get South Side of the Sky. One of my favorite Yes compositions, and very typical of this album and of this era. You know, it's before they got right out of control with their sidelong songs and whatnot, but after their humble beginnings, and it actually really rocks. I mean, that main riff, I love that. It's really, really good. It comes after the wind intro, and Bruford kind of sets up some interesting triplets as a fill to bring us in, and yeah, it's really really good. Steve Howe has some wonderful moments too in those verses. We really hear his technique, and we can hear his virtuoso playing style. Which again, I told you he's Steve Howe is a self-taught guitar player as far as I'm aware, and what a natural. He's phenomenal at it, and there's all kinds of great techniques on display, particularly on South Side of the Sky. The famous part, of course, is the big middle section, which almost sounds like a piano concerto. That part was written by Rick Wakeman. It had to have been. Although, unfortunately, he didn't get a writing credit because of the Bologna contract. It's too bad for him, because it is one of his great contributions to Yes, I think. I love the middle section of South Side of the Sky. And we get some of those famous Yes vocals. Na 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 na. Really great. On the whole, South Side of the Sky, one of my favorite Yes tracks. And of course, it all winds its way back into the heavy part, and we get that killer riff again. Really good. And that concludes the first side, so we flip it over, and we get side 2, which opens with Bill Bruford's solo composition. And this one's often forgotten about, I think, mainly because it's 30 seconds long, and for the most part, it's kind of, when you first hear it, it sounds musical. It's rhythmic and it's very dissonant and wacky, but it's actually a really cool little composition. Really, 5% for nothing. He's got these titles, some comment on royalty payments, I think, or something like that, or I'm not really sure. But rhythmically, it is quite good. It's a sign of what was to come from Bruford. Of course, he had a cool solo career in the late '70s, and he did Earthworks later on. Maybe we'll talk about Earthworks one day. I'm a huge Bruford fan. But yeah, it's cool. Very rhythmic and weird. It just repeats this, 4-bar sequence twice, I think. But it works as an intro to the second side. Then we get the first proper song of side 2, which is Long Distance Runaround. Possibly as famous as Roundabout. This is the shortest song on the album, and it's the shortest song they were to write in a very long time. It wasn't until well into the late '70s that they did something that was just nice and short and compact before. Again, rather. But it's really, really good. That guitar line is so famous. Wonderful stuff. That's in unison with the piano. Of course, with the verses, Bruford's messing about with the time, doing his wonderful classic drum technique, where he takes a beat out of the bar every time he repeats it. So he lands the snare on the beat and then subtracts a beat the next time. Then it's on the beat. Then it subtracts it 2 more. Something along those lines, but. It is quite weird. Bruford's quite funny in his seminars when he talks about that. Oh, those dangerous days in the '70s when the drummer was given a voice and he could do things like that, and the rest of the band would kind of nod and say, "Yeah, okay, knock yourself out." You try doing that in a band these days, and it's they'll just fix it with their studio trickery, won't they? But yeah, it's a really good song. It's a very fall song. It's an autumn song for me. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. Long Distance Runaround. This is a case where Anderson's pointless lyrics, actually, I really like them. There's something, some of his lyrics do work really well. I know that aesthetically with Anderson, it's not necessarily what the words mean, it's what they sound like. And I hear that on Long Distance Runaround. Cold summer, glistening. I really like that. I don't know, it's a memorable lyric. It's quite cool. And Long Distance Runaround segues into Chris Squire's solo track, which is called The Fish. And this is a contender for one of the best on the album. I really, really like it. There's a few other members that are playing bass on here as well, but I love that main theme, that descending. Really good stuff. It's it's not heavy. It's not super rocky. I wouldn't necessarily call it proggy even, but it's just loaded with cool vibes. I love The Fish. I think it's great. Then we get to track 4, Steve Howe's solo composition. Of course, he already had one on the previous album. He got to contribute Clap, which is a nice little acoustic guitar piece, quite American. But Mood for a Day, which is his guitar composition for Fragile, is very different from Clap. This is much more European. We don't, there's not quite as many American stylings in Mood for a Day. Very classical sounding, actually, which again contributes to the consistency of the album. It makes it a solid run through. I think I like Mood for a Day more than Clap, to be honest. I think there's it almost has like a Spanish influence at times. It's really interesting. I quite like that. And the whole album then wraps up with the very famous Heart of the Sunrise. Again, I've mentioned it before, and I'm probably going to say it a few times in these Yes videos. Dream Theater would not exist if Heart of the Sunrise was not recorded. To me, this is just so Dream Theater of the 1970s. And I hate to make those blatant comparisons all the time, but, again, the Dream Theater ripped Yes off so much! And I'm actually really surprised. I'm sure Dream Theater's done a cover of Heart of the Sunrise, because it sounds like they would do a really, really good version of it. But again, this track is such a defining moment of that era, of that early prog era to me. We get the fast-paced instrumental craziness where, like that main thing, and the key changes are blasting through those, and the paradiddles that Bruford's doing on the ride and the snare are just lightning speed, regular speed for a lot of good drummers, but on record, it sounds fantastic. And then early in the song, we get that bass riff, do 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 do, and we just get Bruford and Chris Squire locked into this absolutely phenomenal groove, and Bruford lays down some, excruciatingly interesting drum fills. And again, we see all of Bruford's techniques with, manipulating the time and whatnot, and it's just so good. Wakeman comes in with some really dramatic chords that fill the whole thing out, and it is a highlight moment of, yes, their whole career for me. I love that part. It goes, back, and then it goes back into the crazy section, and when we actually get to the song, we get a really great contrast. We get a nice, the song itself. The lyrics in that, and the main melody is very, very serious. There's a great contrast in tone between the crazy bits and the serious bits, and there is a great drama to Heart of the Sunrise. But then the changes come up so quick, and you kind of get into the seriousness of the verse, and then you get diddly 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 diddly, which is phenomenal. I love those fast-paced tempo changes and mood changes, like tone changes. They're fantastic. That's what I say. It's such a defining moment for the genre that they were helping to create. It is just utterly fantastic. And again, these are some the case of nice lyrics on the case of John Anderson. Feel lost in the city, and that. Again, it's more about what they sound like and what they sing like than the words, really. But yeah, that's it. That is the Heart of the Sunrise. Of course, it eventually goes back into the crazy bit one last time, and a sudden ending. We hear the sound of a door, and then it's back to "Tell the Moondog, tell the March," and then it ends quite abruptly. So it's a quirky album. Like I said, it's unique in the Yes catalog because they never really did anything quite like it, but before or after. But it is an essential album, a classic album. If you're interested in progressive music, you have to get this. It's just one of those absolute essentials. It's like Court of the Crimson King. You gotta hear it. And again, the sound of the band. Compositions aside, they'd really get to a point where they developed this wonderful crispness to their sound, and that is in no small part thanks to Bill Bruford, who again, enormously influential to the sound of the band, and just enormously influential as a drummer in general. It's got some great stuff. So yeah, that's Fragile. I hope I didn't whitter on too longly, as I do. I always whitter on too longly. Famously, we don't have the famous Yes logo yet. That was to come on the next album. Roger Dean hadn't yet created it, but that's okay. It's coming up next. The next album is Close to the Edge. Their defining moment of awesome sauce, I think. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Send me a like, send me a subscribe, throw me some comments, and we will see you in the near future, or possibly right away with Close to the Edge. So we'll see you all then. Thank you very much.